I really didn't have the idea. It was something that really, it was a God thing and it just showed up. I've always been in some form of coaching around personal leadership development and some form of lay counseling through the church or coaching. I was doing that work and I had just written a book and I was just loving life. And my son started dating a young woman named Danielle. When they met, I wasn't sure that would last very long, but after several months, then they had decided to move in together. So I was trying to get to know her and I would have them for dinner or whatever would go on. Like there was just kind of like arm's length. One day I got up and I was sitting drinking my coffee and scrolling on Facebook like we all do. And I came across this MLive surveillance photo and they were looking for this woman who had committed a crime. So there was a snapshot. And so I stopped and I was looking at it and I was like, do I know that woman? And then your mind just says, of course not, right? And you just go on. Later that day, my son came over and he said, he was very upset. And I said, what's the matter? And he said, well, did you see? I said, see what? He said, Facebook. And I said, Facebook. And he said, Danielle. And I said, oh, I did know that woman. So Danielle had committed a crime and she was going to be going away. And so my focus was my son and just taking care of him. And that was what I set about doing. Next day, I get up, I'm cleaning my house. I put some music on. And I don't know if you've ever had song lyrics speak to you or get your attention, but as I was cleaning, I heard these words. And the first thing that stood out was, there is thought to my role. And it got my attention. And then the next thing I heard was, it matters how this ends. And all I could see was her face. And it just broke my heart. And so I went down to the jail to see her. And I think she was really surprised to see me of all people. And so I said, are you okay? And she said, yeah. And I said, do you need anything? And she said, no. And I said, okay, I have no idea what this is going to look like or mean, but if you'll have me, I would just like to walk with you while you go through this and see if I can support you somehow. And she said, thought about it and said, okay. So I said, okay, I'm going to come see you every week and I'm going to come to your court dates and we're just going to see how this goes. Well, she wound up being sentenced to 3.5 years to prison. So I started going to see her every week at prison. And after a couple months of that, one day I just asked her, I said, Danielle, would you like to do a Bible study with me? And she said, sure. I said, cool, I'll send you a book. I'll have the book. We'll talk about it when I come. And so we started doing that. The next day after asking her that, I went home and I started seeing all these things about Thistle Farms sort of showing up, right? I had learned about that organization a year before meeting Danielle. And I was totally enamored with what they did, like the way that they helped and served women, restoring them to new life kind of thing. I kept seeing all these things about Thistle Farms showing up in my awareness. And so I just paused and I had learned about them a year before meeting Danielle. And so I just stopped and I was like, all right, God, why am I seeing all this stuff about Thistle Farms? And I heard him say, because you're going to do this work. And I like to title everything. So I said, I don't even know what I'd call that. He said, you'll call it Soar. And I said, Soar. And he said, because it will give them wings. And so I said, okay, I'm about it. I have no idea how this is happening, but okay. And the next day I got an email from Danielle from prison. She said, I can't wait to see you on Friday. We're going to soar through Bible study. And I was like, you gotta be kidding. And so anyway, so I go to see her that Friday and I come in and she's like, starts to chat. I said, no, sit down. I got to ask you something. She said, what? I said, did I ever tell you about Thistle Farms? And she said, what's that? I said, okay. And I said, did I ever say soar to you? She's like, no, why? So I tell her the backstory. She said, do you want to hear something really weird? And I said, yeah. She said, I actually deleted that word when I typed it because I thought it was a weird word to use and something told me to put it back in. So I did. I said, oh yeah, something did. So she said, I have goosebumps. I think this is happening. I said, oh, it's happening. That was like in November of 16. And then in January of 2017, I went down to Thistle Farms then to see how they do what they do. And when I got there, I sat in the car outside in the parking lot and cried for 15 minutes because I thought, I know that when I go back, when I come out of there, my life's going to be different. I just knew it. And it was. And I came home and I was blown away by what I found. You know, it was just would tell people, if you want to know what love as a business model looks like, that's where you go see it. And it's palatable and powerful, and it was changing women's lives. And so I was overwhelmed and blown away, and came home and was just like, all right, let's do this. And so I started I have a wonderful friend, Tracy Collier. She's a fire starter. And so I got with her, and we just started telling people. We formed a board, and 7.5 years later, here we are. And I have a lot of people who reach out and say, well, how did you plan this? And what was the business plan? And and the answer is just faith. That's the business plan. That's the model. And it's to take all the things of love and faith and apply them and walk in them. And they don't make sense to our culture. I just keep showing up and doing the work. And he just keeps meeting me there. So that's how this goes. So we first bought a home. And so we have a home where we have a residential program where women come to heal and have their lives restored. And then this is the other end of that spectrum, where they needed financial independence and freedom. And so we wanted to be able to employ them in a mentoring environment while they're reestablishing themselves financially and growing more fully into skills and rebuilding. She just was ready to retire. And so I got a call from one of our board members, Mary, and she said, did you know Anna's was for sale? And I said, I had heard that. She said, well, let's go look at it and see if it's a potential for the cafe. I said, okay. So I met her here, and it's huge. And so I was like, this would be amazing. And it would be a really big undertaking. And interestingly, I don't know as I've really shared this with a lot of people, but after we came to see the building with the realtor and all that, we were walking out of the building, and when I was last one out, I got to the door, and I kind of turned back and looked into what is now our dining room, and I just sensed God go, done and done, just like that. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was like so quickly. And so Mary, who also owns Cornerstone Properties, bought the building. And so we as Soar leased the building from her. Oh my gosh, we have the best community. I mean, so many individuals, churches, businesses, organizations have come around to eat here, to support us, and pray for us, encourage us, spend money here, all the things to help make this work, because I think everyone understands this need. Because doing this work, if I have learned nothing else, it's that this began with one woman, right? And because of that, her children's lives are different. Her extended family's lives are different. And so you heal one woman, and you literally start healing generations, first through family, community, and then beyond. And these issues that we're walking out, trafficking, addiction, sexual trauma, these are things that impact every single family one way or another. And so our community, it takes a whole community to do this work, because we not only have a residential program and a cafe, but we mentor. We go into the county jail here every Wednesday morning from 8 to 10, and we do a mentoring group there. And then we also go into Women's Huron Valley Correctional Facility and still continue to mentor there. And then we have a community support group here at the cafe every Monday night at 5 o'clock. And we have seen ladies, we meet them, say, at our county jail mentoring group. And then when they get done at jail, they come to our community group. We have one gal who we met her at jail. She started coming to community group. She had a baby, and another one of our mentors within SOAR actually took her into her home because she didn't have anywhere to go. And so she was mentored through that. Now she works here at the cafe. So there's so many ways that we, work with women. Jackson is a shining city on a hill, and he has every intention of making it that. And he wants to use SOAR as a way to help bring that about. I know there's so many incredible works that he's doing in our community right now through different organizations and businesses. But I'm excited about what he wants to do in this town. This is such a beautiful city. There's so many just loving families, business owners, whatever, that there's so much potential. And I'm really excited to see how that's going to unfold.